Hello, I'm Andi Van Laanen,
And I'm Victoria Pineiro.
and we are both first-year undergrad students at the University of Oregon. This is our research project titled Professionalism, Swearing in the Workplace. This project focuses on how swearing in professional settings impact people's perceptions of others with measures for potential gender biases in said settings. In this presentation, we will be going over our project model and goals, our measurement methods and distribution processes, what we found, and finally, what our findings mean. To start, we are going to cover our basis for this project. We were largely inspired by Danette Johnson's perceptions of swearing in the work setting and expectancy violations theory perspective, which looked at perceptions of swearing from a professional standpoint. From there, we then formed the question, how does the use of swearing impact perceptions of professionalism in the workplace? We hypothesized that there would be a negative relationship between swearing and professional status, and along with this, our goals for this project were to discover potential patterns and relationships between bias, professionalism, and gender in relation to swearing.
All right, to begin, we chose to do a Qualtrics survey. We decided to do a Qualtrics survey to get as much outreach as we possibly could during COVID-19, as well as it being one of the most efficient ways to measure individual thoughts and just get a good self-report through the surveys. So to begin our survey, we had two versions of our surveys distributed. One survey consisted of an audio of a man swearing and a woman not swearing. And the second survey consisted two audios, one of a woman swearing and one of a man not swearing. So to begin, the same thing for each survey, we asked for consent and just prefacing that this may contain some triggering and vulgar content, as well as that you are participating in an undergraduate research study by taking this survey. We then move on to preface the context of a professional setting. So while you're listening to these audios, you're thinking about how likely you are to support the vision of these audios. And it's a mock presentation about company safety. So just keeping that in mind while you're listening to both of them. We then move on to listen to one of the first audios. And after that, you are followed up with semantic differential scale questions. You have 3 of these, and each of them are on a scale of 0 to 5. An example of some of these is how professional was the presentation, 0 being least professional, 5 being most. And then how did you feel after listening to this presentation, 0 being bad and 5 being good. We then move on to open-ended questions and assumptions. So this is just an empty text box allowing the participant to give us their assumptions about the colleague that they're listening to just through the audio. And we asked for them to think about things like age, race, gender, education status, their hometown, and occupation. You then move on to listen to the second audio, where you have to answer the semantic differential scale questions and open-ended questions once again. And then once you've listened to both of the audios, you go to the forced choice questions where you have to answer the questions being either audio 1 or audio 2. So an example of this is which audio made you more uncomfortable, audio 1 or audio 2, and then which one was more professional. At the end of the survey, we ask each participant to tell us a little bit about themselves so we can see who is taking this survey. So we ask questions like ethnicity, level of education, age, and their gender identity. So to distribute our surveys in the best possible way, we stuck QR codes around our campus, the most trafficked areas such as dorm halls, dining halls, and just like libraries where places are heavily trafficked. And this was a mix of both men swearing and women swearing surveys. And then we proceeded to also post the survey links on our social media pages. And that also got a lot of traffic. We also emailed our friends, families, just people we know to also take the survey. Yes.
After distributing our surveys, we found there to be a negative association between swearing and perceived professionalism. As you can see here, both audios that contain no swearing had a higher mean of perceived professionalism at a 4 out of 5 for women and a 3.39 out of 5 for men. On the other hand, the audios that contained swearing had very low means of perceived professionalism, with an average of 1 out of 5 for women and 0.25 out of 5 for men. As Victoria mentioned in our methods section, we also asked survey participants open-ended questions about their assumptions of the speakers in each audio. The most common terms in the non-swearing audios were white, college education, and middle class, while for the swearing audios, they were white, young, uneducated, and disrespectful. It is clear that the repeated words for swearing audios carry more negative connotations, again reinforcing our association claim that swearing has a negative impact on perceived professionalism. It is also important to note that there appears to be no discrepancies between gender, implying that gender biases may not impact one's opinions of professionalism in regards to vulgarity. The last important aspect of this section is our discrepancies. The survey with the woman swearing received 136 responses, while the one with the man swearing received only 60. Additionally, the primary respondents were white college-age students, which may add biases we did not account for and could insinuate why both swearing and non-swearing groups were primarily assumed to be white.
As Andi stated, we did not see any discrepancies between gender, which was the opposite of what we had hypothesized. We expected to see more of a negative correlation between women and professionalism, but that was not present. As predicted before conducting our research, the results show that there are negative associations between swearing and professionalism. A really good example to show this is through our data from our differential scale question, which asks how supportive you are of the initiative after listening to the audios. So for the mean numbers for the non-swearing audio for men is 3.8. The mean number for non-swearing audio for women is 4.17. The mean for the men swearing is 1.25. And the mean for women swearing is 2.77. So that kind of shows you how people feel about each audio after listening to them, just through that one question. And then one other thing to note is that in our last questions where we asked about personal characteristics of the person that is taking the survey, the most common trends were that these people were they were white and college aged, which is expected because our survey population we are surveying college students in a city in Oregon. So not unexpected. But to reiterate another point that Andi introduced, we had an uneven amount of surveys taken. Our women swearing survey had 136 surveyors, while our men swearing had 60. Additionally, our open-ended questions had a lot of discrepancies because although we did have some guidelines about what to talk about when these people were participating in our survey, it varied a lot in detail. So we got very vague responses such as white man. And then an example of a really detailed response would be, I would assume this person is a cisgendered white male with formal education. I would assume he came from a middle-class family and lives in the suburb. He enjoys Legos in his free time. So the variation in the responses made it harder to gather conclusions from this specific question. If this research was to be conducted again in the future, here are some alternatives to consider. A similar study with a larger and more random sample would be probably uncovering a bit more just based on different ethnicities and a different research group, as well as examining perceptions based on levels of swearing instead of gender. So instead of having a man and a woman and swearing and no swearing, exploring with different intensities of swearing and seeing how that can affect different things. And then to reiterate again, just involving more ethnically diverse speakers and participants and seeing what results those yield. And like we stated in the last slide, refining our open-ended questions to not get such a large scale of vague and detailed answers.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them. Lastly, we would like to give a special thanks to the University of Oregon and Melissa Bay Burke of the Linguistics Department for all of the support on this project.